Obviously, the biggest thing in your life is you were diagnosed with cancer. So can you kind of tell us a little bit, maybe leading up to that?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a crazy like roller coaster, and it only lasted 2 months, thank goodness. But it was funny because October 21st, I had some weird pain, and my dad has genetic kidney disease, and so I was really nervous that it was something along the lines of that. So I went to the ER, and they did some CT scans, and like everything looks good. You do have a kidney stone though, so like it might pass. We don't know when. I was like, all right, cool. And then like a week or two later, I thought I had the flu. I was like not able to keep anything down. At one point, I was like, maybe it's food poisoning. I don't know. And then it stopped, and I started having these intense pains, which I was like, oh, I think it's this kidney stone. It's definitely this kidney stone. And then I went back to flu-like symptoms, and I was just like calling my mom. I was like, she's like, well, the flu's going around. Like, just try to keep track of it. I was like, all right. And then it went back to these stabby pains, and I was like, I'm definitely past. I was like sitting on the couch watching TV for days, just like chugging water. And then finally, my one uncle was like, if it gets too much pain, just go to the hospital. They'll give you some like dope drugs and like send you back on your way. And I was like, all right, cool. So December 14th, it was a Thursday. I was supposed to work, and I woke up at like 3 in the morning, and it was like unbearable. And so I was thinking about walking to the hospital right down the block. And when I called my mom, she's like, well, let's go to LGH because you already went there and you have like a repertoire, I guess. Yeah. And so I get there, and I'm like, I think I'm passing this kidney stone. Like, give me all the drugs you can. And I'm just like kind of loopy and like whatever, and like cracking jokes with my mom. And then they did a second CT scan to see where the kidney stone was. And luckily, the doctor on staff happened to notice that my ovary was really inflamed. And then he went back to the original CT scan from October 21st and realized that you could technically see it there too. The problem is CT scans aren't meant to see cancer at all. So it was kind of one of those things where he luckily just noticed it on a fluke. And so he comes back in the room and he's like, your ovary's inflamed. And we're like, all right, like whatever. Yeah, what is that? I don't know what that means. And then he leaves and comes back and he's like, it's a mass. And then my mom starts getting a little weird. And then, so I'm like, texting my bosses, like, I think I'm going to be here for a bit. Like, I don't know. And then all of a sudden they mentioned an oncologist. And that's when my mom was like, all right, let's start making calls. So I was like, I got to call my grandma, got to call my dad, like all this stuff. And so they had to schedule a surgery the next day. So they admitted me, and I had to okay 3 separate scenarios. So there was one scenario, they would open me up. I was already going to leave without one ovary, and they were going to match it with the frozen cancer cells that they have on site. And so I had to okay the ovary being taken out, and if it didn't match the cancer cells, it was just like a fluke, sew me back up and I was fine. If it did match the cancer cells, then they would take out my other ovary, so I had to okay that. And then the third option was they open me up and they just see it everywhere. And they're like, what do you want us to do? I was like, I'm done with this. Like, take whatever it touches. I don't care. So I went into surgery. And it was funny because even my friends visited me that night. And I was just telling them, like, fluky. And, like, my best friend started, like, crying. And I was like, are you okay? She's like, am I okay? Like, what the heck? She's like, you're the one that's sitting in a hospital bed right now. And I was like, oh, I never thought about it that way. But, like, okay. But I came out of anesthesia after the surgery, and the first thing I asked was like, did you have to take out my other ovary? And they're like, yeah. I was like, all right, so it's cancer. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, what else? And they just gave me the list, and they're like, it was pretty bad. So at first they thought it was ovarian. And then, so I was recovering from that surgery and like the initial shock of everything and just being like 24 hours before that, I had no idea. Right. And then went home to my mom's house so that she can like watch over me. Still had problems, and it was like Christmas Eve. I was still not able to eat anything. I was getting really dehydrated. I couldn't like walk very far without getting dizzy. So I was like, let's go back to the ER. I'm just going to get some fluids. I was going to go to this awesome New Year's Eve party at one point. So I was like, oh, let's just get all prepared so I can like make an entrance. And then they found out that I had blockage in my lower intestines. And they weren't sure what it was. They thought maybe my intestines just kinked up or something, so they had to go back in the same section. Found out it was my origin tumor, and it had eroded away a little piece of my lower intestines, so it got a hold of my ovaries. And cancer likes estrogen, so it went a little crazy. So I went from being like, I feel like I had like 2 diagnoses. I had like diagnosed with cancer December 15th and diagnosed with my specific cancer January 5th. And then since then it's been like, I keep falling into these very rare categories. So it's a very rare aggressive cancer that usually if you're a man over the age of like 65 and you have history of celiacs and Crohn's disease in your family and you're super unhealthy, you eat a lot of fatty foods, you smoke a pack a day for decades, you have like a 1 in 100,000 chance of getting it. And then there's me, which I was just like, I remember being on morphine, I was asking a doctor, like, how rare am I? And he was like, you're pretty rare. I'm like, no, really, how rare am I? Like, you need to tell me. And he's like, you're like 1 in a million. I'm like, awesome, great. And then since then, I've had a little string of these rare moments. Like, I ended up getting a blood infection when they put in my chemo port, and they still have no idea how I got it. Like, everything looked fine. I was, like, sweating a lot. And they're like, oh, that's weird. You have a blood infection. So I was hospitalized for like 5 days after that. I had to get a PICC line in my arm at one point. And so I was like, I went to TELUS at one point. I needed to give myself antibiotics. So I went to like the family bathroom and I was like, this is like the weirdest thing ever. I feel like I'm like, if anyone would catch me, they're like, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm just like vials of saline going into my arm. Yeah, right. I used to have fun with it when my friends and I would go out to like lunch because I would have to do it like 7, 3, and 11. And I'd be like in the car in a parking lot at like Olive Garden, just like with like my ice packs and my antibiotics and all this stuff. And then I had my 2 chemo drugs, and during my 6th dose, I almost went into anaphylaxis shock, which is apparently a very rare side effect for my 1 chemo drug. And so now it's like a joke between me and my mom where like every time they're like, well, this doesn't normally happen. And we're like, class, like I can't just have cancer. I have to be like extra about everything. But yeah, so I've been on chemo. I just finished my 11th dose. And it's just been like a whirlwind of, like when I got my prognosis, I was talking to my doctors. I was like, you need to tell me like what you tell other patients that have this cancer. And they said 2 years if everything goes wrong, and usually 5 years if everything goes perfectly fine. But then there's that slim margin of remission. There's like 5% of people actually end up hitting remission. And so I was like aiming for that for a really long time. I was like, if I want to get all these rare things that don't normally happen, I'm going to try to be the 5%. So yeah, it's just been like a roller coaster of anything that weird happens, I go into the ER right away, which is kind of, it's weirdly comforting because I start to know the ER staff now, which is like I'll walk in and they'll be like, oh, Kelly's here. And I'm like, yeah, here I am. Like, I don't know what's going on, but hopefully it's nothing. I go to LGH, so there's like a cancer floor. So anything happens, I get admitted, I automatically get put on this floor. So like the staff, I'm familiar with the staff. Sometimes I'll bump into them at the Cancer Institute and like catch up with them and stuff. So I've been telling other people that I find have been diagnosed in the area that like 8-Lyme floor is like one of those homey places. Like it sucks to be there, but the people there are like really cool. And they were making me laugh and all that stuff, so.
And this is all just this past, October through January that all that happened.
Yeah, so it's been about 8 months since my first, get-go in
Yeah,
there.
still pretty raw.
Yeah, my friends all joke that, I literally woke up and started making calls to my friends, you need to get to the hospital right now. It's bad, it's really bad. They're just telling me, I'm, still foggy, and I'm just, it's kind of, I'm, calling people, and they're just like, what's going on? I'm like, you need to get here right now. And I had at least 20 people in my room within an hour after my surgery.
That's amazing to have that support.
I know. I really feel very lucky that family, friends coming in, like family, friends even like staying the night with me, because for a while I was like, I can't be in the hospital any moment alone. It just gave me anxiety. And so I'd have friends come sleep in like the pull-out bed just to like be with me. And people bringing me, like my first surgery, I still couldn't eat anything, and I didn't know it. And someone baked me like a whole pie and like biked over and was like, just showed up to my room with a full like warm pie. And I was just like, nurse, get me a fork. My grandmother had breast cancer when my mom was younger. And apparently she lost a lot of support, which I think is crazy. Like, she had friends that were like, I can't really deal with this right now. Like, it's too much. And so she would go to chemo alone and have all these emotions pretty much alone. And then meanwhile, my friends are like, tell me everything. Like, I want to know everything you're thinking. And like, we've had conversations about death. I've had moments where I'm just like, I need to go for a drive because I'm thinking horrible things. And they'll be like, all right, what do you want to talk about? So I've been very lucky with the community and my work and the family. And I did like wrestle with the fact that like a week before my diagnosis, I was I was 25. I was about to turn 26, like a normal person, just like stressing about work, stressing about money, like hanging out with my friends, trying to go out, see shows. And then suddenly it was like, you could die. And like, I've talked about how sometimes it's weird when people will say, do you want to know when you're going to die? And it's like, yes or no. And I'm like, well, how about, do you want to know when you might die? Like, there's like a chance that it could be 5 years. It might not be. I'm hoping, since I'm the outlier, that I can stretch it out to a lot more. But like, it's still that I suddenly had like a ticking time clock like on my head about everything. Like, I was like, I'm hanging out with people that make me laugh. That's it. Like, no time for these people that drag me down. Like, I'm going to work because working makes me happy, and I'm just going to bust my ass about it, and just like, I'm going to go to more shows. I'm going to travel when I can, just because there's going to be a moment when I can't do that anymore.
We blog about all your experiences on the website. It's the Cougar, right?
Yeah.
Just what a name from your childhood, I guess.
Yeah, my parents used to call me Kooky Kelly. And which, it was funny, they named me Kelly because there weren't that many nicknames. And they were like, we didn't want to have like all these nicknames for you. And then like the second I got home, they're like, oh, Kooky Kelly. And it turned into like Kookarama Llama and like Kooker, Kooks. But yeah, so it started off as a blog that I came back from Philly. I was like 23. I was angsty, the only way a 23-year-old can be. And I was living with my mom at the time for like a couple months. I was like, argh. And my mom used to always tell me, like, if you're going through something and you can find the words for it, it's easier to tackle and process because it's, like, making sense and seems more logical. And so I made a couple posts here and there about how much I hated living with my mom and then kind of forgot about it. And then all this stuff happened, and I was like, well, it would be nice to jot everything down and also kind of record where I came from, type of thing. Like, I'll go back to my original post and just be like, wow, I had no idea, but look at it, like, I'm so much better now and I've learned so much more. And so I decided to share it with some of my, like, on my Facebook page, pretty much just being like, well, if you guys think it's interesting. I've heard some of my friends, when they came to visit me in the hospital, were telling me my outlook was a very interesting one. So I was like, oh, if you guys find this entertaining, so be it. Like, that's cool. And also there was somebody that was very open with me, and I didn't even know her personally at all, but she like helped me with like some weird questions that like, she's like, did doctors tell you this? And I was like, no. And she's like, okay, well, this sometimes happens. And so then it started morphing into like, if somebody knows someone going through a diagnosis or is being diagnosed, and it all is scary and weird, but it's not abnormal to be lost in that. So I was like, if anyone sees it and like connects with it in some way, hopefully it helps a little bit, because I had so many people helping me through mine. And so it's just something that when I'm bored or if something comes up, usually for a while I was like, I only blog when bad stuff happens. So I was like, try to sprinkle.
I don't think so. I thought it was actually really positive. Like, it's brutally honest, but it's so real. It's like refreshing to read all those thoughts going through your brain, because sometimes it's like super positive and like, you know, girl power, I'm badass.
I try to tell people that I know have been diagnosed on like support groups and stuff, just like be angry and be sad, but also like if something good happens and you laugh, just also embrace it and just don't think about your situation for a hot second. Like trying to focus on like if a good thing happens, no matter how small it is, and it makes me laugh, then I have to like grab onto it and remember it for days that I don't have the energy to like do fun things. Like, I have a string of cancer jokes that I would turn around, or I would always joke around, but like, park in the spot you're not supposed to park at. Like, I have a cancer card, it's fine. Like, who's gonna say anything? And then, but just like using that to kind of like lighten people up around me to be like, oh, like, yeah, there's gonna be dark times, but like, it's still kind of fun. Like, there's still funny things that like, I told my mom I'm practically a 65-year-old unhealthy male at this point, so like, let's roll with it. But I remember I play intense Uno with some of my friends, and one guy was visiting me when I was in the hospital, and I was on a lot of morphine, so I was just talking. And at one point I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to lose a game of Uno ever again. And he was like, what do you mean? I'm like, I have cancer. Who wants to beat the girl with cancer in Uno? Like, and so I would do that all, like, I remember one of my friends was like, wanted to go play pool, and I was like, well, I'm on chemo, so do you really want to beat someone who's on chemo right now? Like, you know how that would look to you and other people around you? Like, think about that. And so I was like, okay, let's do it another time. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, it's so bad. But yeah, so like just finding little pieces of fun times and funny moments, and kind of lightening up the mood around me too, just to be like, it sucks and there are really bad days, but the good days that happen, they still happen. They might be few and far in between in some moments, but they still are thankfully there.